So, anyways, thank you for joining me here today.
Now exiting.
Can't find what I'm looking for. So, okay. So, thank you for joining me. Sorry about the late start, the technical issues. I'll have to apologize when I post this material on there. At least we won't have a 55-minute hard limit on the meeting and the presentation, so we won't get cut off, hopefully. Anyways, tonight, I'm going to cover some PowerShell, just some very basic stuff about PowerShell. I don't know, obviously I don't know how skilled or unskilled the various people seeing this are going to be. So I'm kind of starting from a very basic level. I'm assuming we all have a pretty good grasp of logic. So I'm really just kind of going to talk about kind of a little bit about the types of variables, and then kind of talk about PowerShell itself a little bit, and I'm going to talk about how some just kind of the most frequent commands we use from a few different subsets, because there's a lot of stuff. So most of the commands are going to come from like built-in PowerShell stuff. I'm going to go over a few commands that are used in Active Directory, and I'm going to go over a couple of commands. I'm going to go over like one command from Exchange Online. Um, because of that, I don't want this to go like a multi-day lecture or anything here. So kind of limited due to our limited time. I will be going ahead, and I think we're going to do like, we'll build on this. Maybe later presentations can build on doing some more in-depth stuff and more complex things. But kind of good just to give you an overview. Maybe show you a few scripts, get you familiar with it if you're not familiar with it, to see what some of the things you can do, and hopefully it'll be useful to you and you'll learn something. Um, so what is PowerShell? Well, it's like it's an operating system interface. It's a shell, just like Bash or the Windows GUI is a shell. But it's more than that too. It's actually like a full scripting language. Um, like you could script with command line, which is also another type of shell. But obviously, it's not always the prettiest or easiest. Um, PowerShell's got a lot of features to make it very abstract, easy, human readable, easy to work with. Kind of like Bash to a certain extent too, if anyone's ever used that in Unix or Linux environments. But it's also a scripting language, like I mentioned. Currently, PowerShell 5.1 is the last Windows-only release of PowerShell. I think the current production version is PowerShell 7, which is PowerShell 7. PowerShell 5.1 currently is what ships with Windows 10. It's also can be run all the way on machines back to Windows 7 or Server 2008 R2. If you happen to have those in your environment, you can update them to run PowerShell 5.1. PowerShell Server 7 is the current version. That's an open source version that's cross-platform that runs on Linux, Unix, Mac, Windows. Doesn't matter what version, you can run PowerShell on them. Pretty much many of your basic built-in functions are still there, but a lot of your Windows-specific functions have to be brought in through modules. With the PowerShell open source cross-platform version, but pretty much it's as capable and around on par as 5.1 as far as the features you can do with it go now. The earlier versions of the open source were not quite as useful, but it is now. But they do now have a lot more feature parity going on with that. The 5.1.7 feature parity. They really want to push PowerShell to be a cross-platform management platform for different environments. So they're a big thing. It's also tied very closely to the .NET framework. Of course, the Windows 4.8 is current Windows .NET framework, with cross-platform 5.0 being the new version out there, and then the previous .NET Core versions out there. Those are they're kind of merging the Windows and the open source versions together. And 5 is where they kind of come to parity. But the Windows 7, PowerShell 7 is tied to it, and you can basically in PowerShell you can take advantage of any .NET framework or library you need. So if you need to do advanced things, you can get pretty fancy, almost like you're running full-blown applications with it. So we're going to talk about scripting and variable types now here, just so you have an understanding when we talk about working with PowerShell. Here, some of this will kind of help you with that. So there's various scripting and programming languages can either be strongly typed or loosely typed variables, generally speaking. What does a strongly typed versus loosely typed means? Strongly typed means that you have to specifically specify the type of variable you're using, whereas loosely typed, it's kind of like just you don't have to explicitly define it. By default, PowerShell loosely types everything, and it's the type of data is inferred as based on what you're putting into it. Some of the variable types that PowerShell has, and PowerShell has, are string, integer, and they have their own one called PS object or PowerShell object, which many things will be. They'll use the PS object as a base platform to build things on. So, for instance, if you were to import a CSV file or some other delimited file into a PowerShell variable, that would create a PS object. If you pull information from Active Directory or user accounts, or you pull information from like Exchange Online mailboxes, that creates a PS object. And really, ultimately, what a PS object is think of it like a big, kind of think of it like a big database, more or less. You have different rows for different data. That's the array part of it, because there's multiple records in a PS object. Usually it can be one record, but usually it's multiple records. And you have different data types. So like you might have a column that says username and a column that says display name. And each one of these can be considered like each row or record contains the information for each one of those columns for that particular row. The other thing about this is that PowerShell, all of their variables have built-in properties and methods. Let's see, somebody's just trying to get in. Let's let them in real quick. Were they able to get in? Yeah. I guess they left before I had a chance to admit them. We're going to go back here, though. Sorry to interrupt that. Each variable, and I'm going to show this to you, has properties and methods. And what are the difference? Properties is a property of the variable. And then there's methods. And what methods are they are like things you can do to manipulate it or get information from it. I think I'll make it a little more clear when I show you that, an example of that a little bit later on. But those are like the three big things, kind of thinking. Just pointing out some of the variable types in there. Those are the biggest ones. There's obviously other ones. There's like date and time, things like that. Arrays, we talked about the PS object being an array, but at the basic thing of that, if you don't know what an array is, it's just kind of like multiple variables. It's multiple line variables. Just think of it like a table column, and it's just like, or a spreadsheet column. You've got multiple values underneath one column. You can have a multi-array where you got each row is an array within the array, which is kind of like what a PS object does as far as that goes. Mentioned how you have properties and methods. So what we're going to look at tonight is we're going to look at We're going to look at loops. We're going to look at some of the built-in commandlets. We're going to look at some Active Directory commandlets. We're going to look at like the Exchange Online commandlets. So those are the three topics we're going to cover. So even PowerShell 5.1 doesn't have all the capability built in. So when you're working with Active Directory or you're working with Exchange Online, for instance, you need to install the modules that have those commandlets. So, so the first thing you want to do when you want to do this, you want to run PowerShell as an admin. You want to set the execution policy to remote sign. By default, PowerShell does not want to run scripts that come from foreign locations or that are not digitally signed with a digital SSL signature, certificate signature. So you can change that. There's a settings. There's unsigned, remote signed, are a couple of examples. Usually remote signed is a good balance between secure and being flexible. That way you can like write your own scripts and you don't have to worry about having them digitally signed. They'll run and execute just fine. And this is also kind of very loose because if you call a PowerShell script explicitly on a command line, With PowerShell, you can just bypass the execution policy altogether on the command line when you call a script. So, somebody this is not going to stop anybody who's really determined to do something bad to your system, but it's just kind of there, and it gives you some protection. So you can install the module. So actually, the actual command, and once you set the execution policy remote sign, you actually just type install-module Active Directory. And then if you press enter, that'll go out and grab the Active Directory module and install it. On Windows 10, you can also get the Active Directory module, if I remember correctly, from the Win 10 features RSAT tools underneath settings, additional things, along with the other like GUI RSAT tools if you wanted to remotely administer the domain from your desktop. As far as the Exchange Online Management module, that is the newest. That's the version 2 module, Exchange Online Management. And again, it's just install-module Exchange Online Management. And it just goes out and gets the module and installs it on your system. So we're going to talk about some of the built-in commandlets. It's actually at the bottom, but I probably should have mentioned at the top. So now in a script or in a PowerShell session, when you want to use a specific commandlet set like Exchange Online Management or Active Directory, you'll use import module, which is down at the bottom of this list here, to import the module first. Until you load that module, you won't have access to any of the commandlets that are in that module. But we'll take a look at that in some scripting shortly. So these are built-in commandlets I'm looking to cover tonight. Go over with you here for the built-in ones. We've got get child item. We've got get content, set contents. We have out file. We have import CSV, export CSV. We have new item, move item, copy item, remove item. We have get local user group, get local group member. We have write host, read host, and we have get date. So kind of talk about these. Some of them seem like they might be pretty obvious. Some of them maybe not so much. Get child item allows you to get a file system. Get child item creates a PS object that lists a file system directory, basically, with all the files and the items that go with that in there. Get content, set content, basically are used to write data to or from plain text files. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be a TXT file. It could be anything that's actually plain text, regardless of what the three extensions at the end. So like you might have a .log file, which again is still text, or you might have a CSV file, which is also just a text file. Out file, basically that just outputs whatever you're outputting to a file. Again, kind of like set content, but it's just creating the file and setting it. Import CSV, export CSV, that allows you to obviously import a CSV file, or actually you can use it and you can actually tell it what your delimiter is. So it doesn't have to be just a comma. By default, it's going to be a comma, but you could have a tab delimited file, or you could have a semicolon delimited file. You could have a pipe delimited file, whatever you want it to be. You can specify that both for the import and export when you're importing or exporting it. But these allow you to basically create CSV files from information you're putting out there. There doesn't always work perfectly because sometimes the data isn't in the format you think it is. So for instance, you might access a property. You might access the property on the command line in PowerShell, and it outputs the text, and that's what you're expecting. But you'll see that when you export to CSV, it says something like Active Directory group type, some junk, and not what you're expecting, because for some reason PowerShell likes to, I guess, take some additional interpretation when you're on the command, like additional interpretation, inferring what you're looking for when you're on the command line, as opposed to when it's outputting the data. I don't know for sure though, but you sometimes have to tweak that. We have the new item, move item, copy item, remove item. So these are exactly kind of what they sound like. These are to manipulate creating, moving, copying, and removing items from the file system. Right. Then we've got get local user, get local group member. So these do basically kind of what they sound. Get information on a local user account, get local groups on the machine, or get the local group members of a specific group. Write host and read host. So write host is used to output used to output text that you want to show to on the command line, whereas read host is used to can do two things. If you just do read host by itself, it kind of puts a pause in there where you just have to like press any key to continue. But you can also use read host to input data into like a variable. So if I wanted to ask you, what is your name? You know, what is your name? And you would enter your name, and you press enter, and then I could use that. I could collect that information and now use it in my script. So you might use this. I'll show you some scripts where that is sort of done already, so you can see how that works. We have get date. That just basically gets the current date and time when you run it, right there. And that's pretty much an overview of those that we're going to kind of try to cover. So now we're going to talk about. So we're going to actually go over to the PowerShell real quick and kind of look at a couple of these. So break it up a little bit. Of course, he froze on me again. Right. So I already have some windows and scripts up here to take a look at. But so let's right here. We're going to go to an administrative PowerShell window. So we're going to say get local group. Or so get local user. So you can see we just pulled up all the local users on the account, right? So I can now like pipe that to a variable, and let's say users equal get local user, right? So now I didn't return anything, but if I actually look at my variable, we'll see I have the same information there. Now we're actually going to take a look at something. I'm going to show you this. Remember I mentioned properties and methods. Can you all see what I'm doing, by the way? Just to make sure. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. If it's too small or anything, let me know. But so now I'm going to show you what the properties and methods. So I believe GM stands for get method. I can't remember for sure, but we're going to pipe that. We're going to pipe that variable to get the methods and properties of this variable. So we can see here we have 5 methods and a whole bunch of properties to it. So, we can now put, something to string using that variable. We can get the type of it. So I can actually like do this as a method. And we can see that shows us that it's a name. Its name is object and it's a system array. Going back here, we have different things here. So we have the different stuff we might see with an account. So we have the user account's full name, the last login, the name of the account, the type of object it is, when the password is changeable, when the password expires, when it was last set, if the password's required, the user ID, whether the user may change the password or not. So you've got a whole bunch of this stuff here, just in there where the account is enabled, right? So we could use PowerShell to alter any of these sorts of things if we wanted to. So just kind of show you an example of how those notes and properties and methods work. Let me see if I can pull up. Yes. So this is an example where it's going to use a couple of things we talked about here. This is actually uses the Active Directory stuff. This is the Active Directory module too, but I'm just going to show you how this is kind of structured so you can see some of it here. So at the very top, you see that we've got a variable there that we're using read host to get an OU for. So I say read host, please enter the OU. So we're going to be looking in the Active Directory a specific OU where we want to search for these users. Then we can see there's a search string which uses the get user AD, the AD user, which basically is filtering by everything there, basically gathering everything in the entire directory. And what I'm pulling is I want to make sure that by default you get a set of properties that Microsoft wants you to get when you pull an object. Many times Microsoft doesn't return all the properties. So if you want to ensure that you get the properties you're looking for, you can name them here. So like what I'm pulling here for this user is the SAM account name, the display name, their mail field, which is their email address listed there. I'm pulling their proxy addresses. I'm pulling the telephone number, and in the search base I'm using is filtering where I'm going to find these users from is from that OU that I entered. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with loops. There are different kinds of loops. There are for loops. There are while loops. There are do loops. But most of the time, you probably find yourself using for loops. So this is an example of a for loop here. So notice that I pulled my user group, my user account. That's going to give me a list of all the users that it found. And now we're going to do this for loop here. We're going to say for each, right? So now we're creating a new variable. We're going to say for each user, which is basically saying for each row, for each user that was returned by the get 80 users command, which is in that variable users, we're going to do the following things. We're going to create a we're going to create a variable. We're going to put the person's display name in. Then we're going to put it in. Then we're basically building a comma CSV file. You can see the display name. Then we attach a comma. Then we put the telephone number. We attach a comma. Then we add the mail. Then we add the user's mail address. And then we come down here and we see another for loop. Now, why is this? This is because the property. So not only is basically the user's variable that we have there a property, or sorry, not a property, an array. The property of proxy users or proxy addresses, the value in there is also another array. So what we have to do here is we do another for loop, and we use this in this case because I didn't grab how many there are existing already. I just started 0, and basically say for 0 until the number is less than however many proxy addresses there are. We're going to just add one and iterate through it. So what we're doing now is we're adding another comma, and then for every proxy address, it's going to add another comma, and then pull each individual proxy address from there, from that second array that holds the proxy addresses. And then the very last thing here is we produce a CSV out file here. We take that log entry file we built that's got all the users, or that has that one user row on it, user information, and we add it to a using out file, add it to a CSV file using the append. So if we don't add append, each individual user is going to overwrite that file, and so when we're done running this, there'll only be one user in there. But by using the append, we can actually build a log. It'll just keep adding a new line to that file with the information we have there. So now, why is this kind of useful and how does this work? Well, not every user is going to have the same number of proxy addresses, right? So that's why you have to have that second loop to go through. You can't use a set loop amount. So for each individual user, it's got to count through how many they have, and add them individually. But what this does, like I said, just outputs a file that has a list of all the users and the information we asked for them. Now, what is this maybe useful for? This is useful if you're trying to check Active Directory information, or if you are you're trying to check Active Directory information. Maybe you're trying to do a preparation for migration from Exchange Online to from Exchange on premise to Exchange Online. So you want to make sure that all the SAM count and all these fields are all in order. You don't have duplicates or anything. That they're filled in for the synchronization. Whatever the case might be, you could use that for this sort of thing. So that kind of, you get to see some of those additional ones there. Let's see here. We can find a nice simple script here for you guys. So we talked about, so far we've kind of covered and seen the usage of the out file, and we've seen the get local user group. These all kind of operate the same. They will produce the same sort of information. Let's do kind of a get child item now. Do I have one up here to do the get child item? Yes, I do. Here we go. So here's another one, a lot bigger than the last one. Obviously, it does a little bit more than the rest of it too. Does this have a get child item in it? No, it does. No, it does not. I'm sorry, that's not the one I'm looking for. Let me pull up one that does. Let's see. Yeah. Some basic ones right here. So I'm going to show you this example. It's a bit longer. It's actually not that complex. You'll notice in a lot of these scripts here, you see these commented out green items. Those are all comments for either myself or somebody using it in the future to understand what the script is doing. It's a good practice to get in the habit of doing. Just even for yourself to preserve your own sanity. If you're coming back to a script 5 years later and you're trying to edit it or update it or whatever, realizing what you were thinking at the time can be very helpful. But so basically, we're gonna kind of look at this entire script here. Everything you see in the script does one thing. It moves files from one drive, from one location to another location. That's it. All this entire script does. Do a lot of that. That's where I find a lot of my PowerShell time is spent, moving files and such. But so we do here. We start off. We get a list of companies. We're calling them companies because this is actually moving some reports we have for companies. So companies is a list of our clients essentially. Each one of these clients has a folder on a map drive here, and you see I'm getting the child item. We're getting the list of items, just the directories, that dash directory. So I'm not getting the files, just the directories. And I'm telling you the path I want to pull that from is I want to get every folder in this mapped uploads drive here. You could obviously make that programmatic. You could add switches or pass that information to the command line or use a read host. It happens to be hard-coded here, though, since it's not something that changes very often. We'll see here about the start of the script. It's getting an answer whether you want to delete these or not. So it's saying, read host, do you want to delete the existing rapid-fire scans in the rapid-fire folder? And it basically says, if you say no, or you fat-fingered and push something other than Y, it gives you an extra alert just to say you entered an N or another character by accident, not deleting existing files at this time. Please note this may cause a script not to work properly. It can be, because it can cause it to move the wrong files and stuff like that. And then you can either Control C if you made a mistake, or you can press Enter to continue. So then we come down here and we start making use of this stuff. So we're using that for loop again. We're doing for each company in the list of companies or our clients that we pulled out there. So we're going to do each one at a time. We're going to come down here. We're going to set up this this path we're setting up a path where the existing reports are that we want to move. So basically, what we're doing here is company in a file, and company here has a property called full name, which is the name of the file, which is the full path of the file, which I'll show you that in a few. I'll show you a few of those differences in a few minutes. We'll pull something up on there. And we can see here that we take that path and then we add rapid fire to it at the end here. And so now that becomes our path it's coming from. So now we do some logic here. If the path exists and the answer was yes, that we want to delete the files, you can see we do a remove item here, and we recursively remove everything in that directory. Okay. Otherwise, if this path here for this RF path that we created that we were looking for here doesn't exist, it just creates the path directory there. So it's like maybe this is a new client we've never used before, right? It just prevents us from getting an error and automatically creates a folder for that client. Let's see. Next thing we do, we're going to get a list of the computers. Basically, where we're pulling this in from is the client has a folder in there that has a list of all of the computers that we monitor for that client. There's a list of them in there, and this is getting a list of those. Each computer has its own directory again. So basically, we do this. We get the child item, we get the directories or list of the computers by looking at the full name of the company again to get that information. I'm not sure why error is there, but Error is literally a built-in variable to tell you if there's an error. Don't know why that's in the script, but it's there. If you ever happen to want to look at what, if you're ever like on the command line, you want to see what the last error is, you can actually look through there. There's like an array. I can even show you that when we go back to the command line too. But coming down here to continue on the script, so now we have a list of the computers. We're going to go through each individual computer. So now we're going through, not only are we going, this is a loop within a loop, not only are we going through each company, but we're going through each computer in the company. And when we come down here is basically we get, as long as the folder name isn't rapid fire, or the computer name isn't rapid fire, we come down here, we do some text manipulation. We take the variable and we take the computer and we take the name, which is also known as a short name of the variable we're looking at, and we look for the hyphen, and we remove the hyphen off the end of the computer name. So basically, like, the computers all have a unique ID attached to them. So the computer name might be George's PC -10, because 10 is the unique ID. What we're doing is we're stripping that -10 off of that, so it's just going to be George's PC. And then we come down here and we have a temporary path being built here, TP, which is the full computer's full name, and we grab this file name.zip, which is basically it's the computer name.zip, and we come down here and we say, if the path exists and the file exists, we're going to go ahead and move this item from here over to that RF path we built earlier. This EA is error action. So if you do run into an error when you're running a commandlet, there's some commandlets are what we call a hard stop or a fatal stop, which means if they encounter an error, your script just stops. There are other ones called a soft stop. So for instance, trying to move a file that you can't move because it doesn't exist or because it's locked or something else results in a soft stop. It'll throw an error at you, but the rest of your script will continue running. What this does is this is a try and catch block, which is not mentioned in there, but this is basically a debugging thing. So if an error happens to be thrown, it's going to catch it and do this other action. But a try catch with a soft error action or a soft soft one, you need to specify the error action be stop, right? So that it triggers, because if you don't, won't trigger this catch down here. We can see, so assuming the file's there and we're able to move it, we'll get feedback on the screen. It says moved file name, which is going to say the computer rapid scan to the RF folder. And then if there is an error when it tries to move it, we'll see here there was an error moving this file. Most likely a copy already exists in the rapid fire folder. So you can see there's a lot of manipulation there. That's all that stuff does. Let's go ahead and take a look at a quick child item real quick here. So let's do get. So that's a list of all the files in my sysadmin folder. Put that into a variable there. So now if I take a look at this sysadmin here, and I look at full name, see I've got a full path, the directory path, C:\\sysadmin file name, it gives me a full path to it. If I do just name, for instance, I just get the file name itself, the short name of the file. Let's see. I think there's a. Let's see what else we have there. System in here. Some other things you might find, like last write time, tells you the last time that a file was written to. You do like trying to remember what it's called. Yeah, even when you run this all the time, you still forget stuff. I had it right. Why didn't it come up? Oh, I spelled it wrong. So there's a list of the creation time there. All this kind of information here. let's take a look at a method here, for instance. Let's look at the files again. Let's do a name. So we've got a file here called Grand Canyon.txt, right? So let's do this. Let's do a replace. You should find. So we manipulated that text on the fly by using a replace method. So like I mentioned, it's kind of like running a script against it. Basically, you can see the same file there that was Grand Canyon is now listed here as Low Canyon because I replaced it because I told it to replace Grand with Low. Now, if I run sysadmin again, though, that value hasn't changed. That's still going to stay Grand Canyon if I don't do the replacement. I could take this now and I could pipe this back into, or I could put this back into a variable. So if this were just say any other sort of text variable, I could manipulate the text and replace things using this method in there. An example that you might do with that is, let's say you're trying to do something, you're have something built in one form of like delineation, and now you want to change that from say commas to tabs. You could replace that throughout the environment, or you need to example that I used for this is I had we have a client that has a lot of emails that go outbound every week, and one of the people that had sent it out had a typo in the from address, so all the emails are marked bad. So I was able to use PowerShell to go through this like 1,000+ list of emails and basically replace the bad address with a good address, and then we were able to reprocess them and send those emails without them having to be regenerated. So that's sort of an example of one of the things you can do with that there. That's the content. We already used some of those. Get date. So for get date, I'm actually going to pull up back here. See if I can pull back here. I have somewhere up here. I don't know if any of you have been to this place. Well, Spiceworks has this great little script center with scripts of all kind of languages and stuff. ActionScript, Apache, AppleScript, all sorts of stuff. I have some up here. I just chose mine because I'm talking about mine. I'm most familiar with them. A lot of these are reports and stuff. Mass Mailer is actually a script that actually has when you run it, it actually produces a windowed front end. I can actually show you that real quick here. So this is some very fancy stuff you can get going with eventually, but come on. Let's try it again. There we go. So this is that script right here. This is just this entire window right here. This thing is EVV mailing is just a PowerShell script, and it shows you some of the more advanced things you can do here. This is a message that gets sent in the subject of the email is hard coded in there, but this is the message that gets sent with the email when you want to send it out. In the body of the email, you can attach files to it if you'd like. So let's just attach something here. We'll attach that file. You can attach any file you want. If you click it in the list here, it just builds a list. Here's the option. You can I don't want to do anything and I accidentally clicked it. You can delete it. You can want to view the file. Let's see what's in that file. Oh, there we go. Or I don't want to actually send it. And then browse down here lets you select a CSV file that has a list of your recipients that you want to use to send the email to. So it has a list of recipients and some other information. You see, like in here, it says consumer ID, provider ID. The spreadsheet that you supply it is supposed to have a consumer ID and a provider ID column. And when it sends this message, it actually replaces these consumer ID and provider ID values with whatever you had in the spreadsheet. So you can get really fancy with that. Maybe I'll even pull that script up to show you that real quick. Although I only want to kind of show it to you for some of the manipulation of the text, not some of the more advanced features. One that we didn't cover is send mail. But you can see down here, a lot of this is just manipulation of the text. We get the message, and then we put some variable stuff like, here's the consumer ID. Here's where you do a replace option. You replace the consumer ID with what was pulled from the spreadsheet. We can see here we're using an import CSV to import that into this mailing list. It grabs the value of what CSV to import from that text box on the form. So just kind of showing you some of those things there. Anyways, coming back here to the script stuff, like this is a good kind of Trevor Trove from some stuff. But I want to come here and show you this time served script here. This revolves about getting dates and times. Let's copy everything in here. Let's get the code. My good old trusty Notepad++. All right, so this is actually not too long. This is actually reduced. If you want, I probably posted in there the link to the original forum post. Somebody was just kind of wanted a fun little thing to put in their PowerShell profile that would tell them how long they've been working at a location. And this went from a much longer script to this. This is like the most efficiency I could get out of it, but it's also the most cryptic. There's absolutely no comments in it, and it makes utilization of arrays for variables and stuff. But you can see here, for instance, we've got the time served is an array. Basically, the array is it's an array that's built in it's years, months, and days is how it's supposed to go. We start off only knowing the number of days. So that's what this formula stuff here is. Basically, we say we get the date from the date of today, which is not the time, just the date. So say it's 3/18/2021. It grabs that date, and then it comes over here, and it subtracts this date time variable. So it subtracts and gets the number of days from this date. So from today's date to this date, it gets the number of days, puts that in that last variable position in the array. It's an array because you got three variables listed in this array. Like I said, it's going to be years, months, and days. The second part is we get this date variable. We get some date variable stuff here, which basically breaks down what year is it. Date variable. What year is it? What month is it? What is the day of the month here? And I don't recall what the age is for, but hopefully we'll see that in the rest of the script here. We've got a 30-day variable. We got 30 days here. Comes up, and this is just basically saying the months of the year that have 30 days. It's November, September, June, and April have 30 days. So now we come into the rest of this. Now this is one of those other loops. I mentioned for, while, and do, or an until. We're actually using a while loop here. So basically, what we're doing is we're taking this. So remember how our time served variable had years, months, and days. And we're basically saying as long as the day number, the day portion of that, is greater than 31, we're going to continue doing whatever's under here. And so we're going to say, so now if it's over 31, but it's under 366, then we do some logic here, and basically is it a leap year? What month is it? Yada yada yada. And basically what it does is either subtracts 365 or 366 days from the year, depending on per year that it adds, depending on whether it's a leap year or not. And you can see that here, like if it's a leap year, the value to reduce is 366. If it's not a leap year, it's 365. And we see here that time served. We're going to take that number of days, 365, away from our number of days, and we're going to add 1 year. You know, the 0 and 2, that's the index of the variables. So when we're looking at a three position array, it starts at position 0 is the first one, position 1 is the second item, position 2 would be the third item. Then we have down here, now we see here, if there are less than 31 days left, if it's a 30-month day, then we're gonna do some manipulation there. If it's less than 366 days left in the year, then what we do is we come down here and we use it, is the month, what month are we in? Is it a 30-day month? Is it a 31-day month? So you can see the logic here. If, for instance, it's a 30-month day, then the value is 30. If the date variable for the month is if it is leap year, or if it's not leap year, if it's February, we see there's only 28 days, and then we see down here that otherwise every other month is going to be 31. We come down here and we can see, find out, this is some of that .NET stuff, because .NET is leap year is a .NET thing. So we find out if it's a leap year or not, and we can determine whether or not it's going to be 28 days, or whether it's going to be on a leap year, we're going to add 29 days. See right there. Then we come down here and we do some more manipulation. Now we start counting months. We start from whatever the day is. As long as the month is less than 12, or as long as, well, we're going to come in here and we're going to go ahead and update that value. And basically coming down the end, we end up with this nice little thing says, you've been a slave for this many years, yada, yada, yada. You can go ahead and, so if we run this, for instance, so if I come here, I can actually paste this right in here. We'll let that run for a moment. Let's see, what else do we have to cover? There's a lot to cover. Showed new item, move item, copy item. So those are all pretty much the same. I'm not actually going to show you an iteration of each one of those. We saw remove item. We saw move item. I suppose the biggest difference between the biggest thing that you might see here with new item usually requires you to specify whether it's an item type. So you'd say an item type, which would be directory or file, would be the answer for that. Whether you're creating, to differentiate between which ones you're creating. We looked at the write host, read host, the get date, and all those other ones. So I think we did a pretty good thing here. Out file is very similar to get content, set content. The big difference between that is obviously you can get content in there. I do have a one of my popular things for using get content, set content is when we use the replace. So for instance, if I want to get the content of a file and I want to replace like somebody's name in there, I can get the content of the file, replace the name, and then just do a set content and overwrite the existing contents of that item. So that finished doing there. You can see the results of from today's date, when that date that's in here is the day I started working for my company. I've now worked for my company for 4 years, 6 days, and 4 years, 6 months, and 30 days. That's technically this. There's a little bug in here. If somebody wants to find it, I'll be happy if you can find it because I haven't yet. There's a little bug in my logic somewhere where depending on what month it is, when you run this, it'll either be absolutely correct, like you've already worked and you've already worked past that day. So it's like it might say I'm actually working my 31st day, or I might actually be on my 31st day. It's a weird bug, really annoyed me, but I haven't gotten back to troubleshooting it yet. It works for the most part. But I'm going to digress. Let's see if I can do a get. Let me try one get content, send content real quick. And then we'll move on to Active Directory because I'm going along here. So let's pick a file here. Let's see what we got here in the log file. So if I just do a get content on the command line like that, it pulls up the content of the file. So I just pulled up a file called log.txt, right? Which apparently is a log file of dates, date stamps. For some half-brained thing I was doing at one point or another. But let's say here, so let's see, this is from 2020. So let's say I want to change that date to 2021. So what I could do here is I can get the content. A couple ways you can do this. You can do this in a one-liner, which you can pipe it back to set content with the same path. What's using it? Maybe it doesn't like it because of the fact that it's there. Oh. The other way to do it, though, is put it into a variable. Call it log. So now we've got the log file there. And then we're going to do set content. We're actually going to pipe that content to so now if I pull that log file again, if I pull that log, I didn't change the date, did I? Dang it. Dang it all. Get the content there, yeah. I thought about pre-recording all this portion, but I just didn't want to go too long. So we're going to get that again. Now we're going to do this. We're going to replace it this time, which I forgot to do. We're going to replace 2020, 2021. See, it automatically updated that when we did that. We're going to actually set that back to the log here. Now we're going to set that log back to... now we go all the way back to get our log now again, get the content. You'll see all the 2020 dates have been updated to 2021. So that's like a form of manipulation you can do in a mass scale for a number of files or within a file, kind of manipulating that stuff. So hopefully this part's been pretty interesting. I know it's kind of all out there. I'm just going to show you some of the ways, maybe not as interactive and stuff you'd like to see, but kind of showing you some of the scripts doing more complex ideas. You can get real fancy, but some of the basic stuff you might find useful. I find this very useful. I've written scripts to help me search through log files. It's a big one. Like if you ever manage like email relays or anything, you ever have any problems, or you manage large amounts of email that are going out and you have log files, it can help you quite a bit to use PowerShell to like find, to be able to find like, information in the log file or search for it or replace information. Be very useful about that. An example that I didn't mention that I pulled up here, I'll just touch on it real quick if I have it here. Where is it? Said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to touch one more thing here just to show you kind of a little bit of what you can do again with like manipulating files, for instance, is I don't know if any of you are familiar with like data sources inside like Excel files, XLSX files, and DocX files and things like that. We had a client that we moved their environment around, and so the data sources got moved, and all those data sources needed to be updated in there, in these files, and basically was able to use PowerShell because the docx format, basically all the X formats Microsoft released are an open format, and I don't know if you know this, they're all really just zip files they're just zip files with information in them. So you can see down here, there's like you see that there's a settings file here, and settings files and stuff here. But basically, the long and short of it is, what this entire script does was it expands the file using zip protocol. Expands the file. It finds the resource, finds the settings XML files right here, and what it does is it replaces part of the information with what you're looking for. And then once it's done, it zips the file back into a zip file that's just called a docx extension. So it basically fixes the data source location without without being able to do it, because unfortunately Microsoft did not build a way into the Office suite to fix the data source that you've moved to point you to a location. So we had to find a way around it doing PowerShell. That was a fun experiment. I digress. So let's move on now. We're going to talk about Active Directory here. Go ahead and open up another PowerShell here. So Active Directory, we're just going to focus on 3. This will be a lot more focused, but we're going to do AD user, AD group, group member. These are very simple to the same. Local user, local group member basically pulls the same sort of thing. Come on, run as an admin. What are you doing here? Run free. Well, dang you. Why are you not? There we go. Sorry, I have this automatically. I have a profile that's automatically set to let me basically, when I first load PowerShell, it's just that I do a lot of Exchange Online stuff. So it's a PowerShell script. When it loads the Exchange Online module, and then it will go ahead and ask me for an account to log in with. It'll automatically connect me to the tenant I want to work on based on whatever email address I put in. And it'll also rename my PowerShell window to that tenant's name, so I can keep track of which one I'm working on if I have multiple ones open. But we're not doing any of that right now. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to import the Active Directory module. So we're going to import module Active Directory. Now let's do a get AD user dash filter 0 or filter star. And as you can see, it pulls up all these different users here. And I'm going to clear that real quick so you don't see too much, because there's a lot of proprietary information. So we could also pull up get AD user. We're going to play with my information because I'm willing to put mine out there for people to steal. So you can use a SAM name to pull a specific user's identity information like that. You can see here, this pulls out a subset of the information I have here. It actually pulls more information. If we sort this by that, we'll see there's a lot more. Well, it's already sorted that way. But now if I do this, like if I want to pull everything I've got on me, look at all that information. So, like I said, it gives you a subset of the information. When you just run it by itself, if you want specific items, you need to run that. But again, just like anything else, we can get specific stuff from here. So if we put this into a variable, for instance, Now, obviously, there's a lot more here than there is in a local user, but man, this is getting real laggy. So now we have user. We've got just all information like so we can see, like, for instance, the password never expires is enabled or not. Why is it not showing up there? I'm not using the right one. Maybe like am I not spelling stuff right? Is there something else on there, maybe? This is one of those idiosyncrasies where it doesn't always show you what you're expecting to say. I don't know why it's not. I know why it's not letting me specify each one, but normally you would be able to do that. Look at the variable, and just each one of those is like a property to the variable. You'd be able to look at that stuff, and I don't know why it's not. Did I not pull it in, maybe? Oh yeah, that's why. Because I left. Yeah. I'm a fool. I'm a fool, people. See how I left that FL on the end there. Let's start though. On. Here we go. Now that I pulled it in properly without the FL, you can see there, I'm looking at the password left set policy. So we can see I haven't changed my password since May of last year. But our password policy is to have a longer password with MFA enabled. So we've reduced it so we don't have to change the password but once a year. So I'll be able to have to do that in coming May. Lovely May. But there's other things too, like, password never expires. Obviously, it's set to false. I can reference any of the information here. Let's do like get AD group. You see, just like that, we have a bunch of AD groups, right? We'll do. If anyone gives me typing lessons, that'd be helpful. Right? So we're gonna look at this domain admin, so we can just like the AD user, we've got information on the AD group too. Same thing, it also doesn't return all the properties. So if you want to do that, you have to select additional properties, or the star just basically returns all. You can see there's properties like member there. So I do that. So we get a list of the users in that group there, like that. From there, that's actually an array list. So if I actually were to do a it should return array system collection, AD property value collection, which is the same thing as array. Basically, it's a collection of values together. So you would want to. So if like you were doing reporting, you'd probably need to iterate through each one of these. But you notice that they get So like it'll actually pull the Active Directory information, the user information. Get AD. So like get AD group member actually pulls a list of Active Directory user accounts, not group information, based on who the membership is, and pulls those up there and produces that information. Again, all this is very useful. I find the biggest uses for it are doing reports and stuff. I go back here to the script center. I can find it. Right here. We go back to the scripts here. There are a couple of reports that if you want to look at the PowerShell that do sort of stuff, manipulate with Active Directory, and some of that stuff are in here. So like there's an administrators report which goes and gives you a list of administrators. This is based on computers. Basically goes through and more or less is supposed to build a group of all user accounts across the entire domain that have Active Directory or have admin rights on a computer, including domain members. So like we'll go out there and get a list of it starts and goes out to each computer, using the invoke method, goes through and remotely executes on the remote machine to get the group member or get the domain admin or get the admin group member, administrators group members there, and then starts noting what PC and who has permissions. And then if it finds like a group in there, or it finds like an Active Directory group, it'll go out and get that information and get those particular user accounts as well, and add them to the report for you. So you can kind of, if you want to take a look at that, you can get review those sorts of things. There's a bunch of stuff here. There's a file and directory size report, which does a lot of the get files, show files, and stuff. So you might want to, if you want to get more involved, some of that stuff you can take a look at here. And there's other people that do wonderful things on there too. So look at other people's scripts too. It's a great repository, especially if you're looking for something to do. Show you some stuff. So the last one we're going to cover tonight is the Exchange Online commandlets, which we're really only going to do the get mailbox tonight. There are some others, but get mailbox is probably one of the most frequent ones I do. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, like I mentioned, is uninstall, but port module exchange. Exchange Online Management, right? So that's imported. Then we're going to do is connect Exchange Online. Wow, this lag is real bad here. Come on, tell me there's no typos. Tell me the caps lock really isn't on, because that'll just screw it up. So now it's going to go through and it's going to pull down the commandlets because they're actually like online. And so like get mailbox here just by itself will return like everybody's mailbox. Some information about them, it's like in my mailbox, mailbox identity. I'll just pull up my mailbox here. We'll see some information about it. Again, it's kind of truncated. You can do an FL, look at all that other good information about the mailbox there. And it'll have things like the product, email addresses here. These are your proxy addresses, which are the same in your Active Directory. If you do Active Directory synchronization, what you see here should also be what you're seeing on your on-premise. You can do lots of things from here. You can get information on it. See, you can with PowerShell here, you can do things like get inbox rules, all sorts of fun stuff. But I know because I want to try to keep this to an hour, and we're running a little bit over now as it is. Just kind of show you this command, like I mentioned, just kind of pulls up the mailbox information for a user. Can help you find out other things like about their policy, about the account and whatnot if you need it. Again, this is a big thing. This is good for reporting purposes. I think tonight's focus with a lot of the stuff I was showing you, stuff I use frequently because it's a lot of stuff I use to draft up ad hoc reports of information, or when I'm trying to troubleshoot something and I'm looking for information, I use these to collect that information by going through, by using things like getting file system stuff, getting contents of log files, or gathering information from Active Directory, or gathering information from Exchange Online for mailboxes, pulling that information together to be able to kind of review that information and use it and act on it. Obviously, this is sort of a lot of this is collection stuff. There's a lot more that goes. You can do setting it and configuring it. But that's pretty much it for tonight's presentation. For those of you that were here, thank you. For those of you who are watching this after the fact that had a problem getting in, I'm quite sorry for that. Not sure what happened with there, but certainly happy to have you watching this after the fact. Anyways, for those who are still here and want to chat for a few minutes afterwards, if you want, I'll be around. If nobody wants to stay, I guess we'll call it an early night. But otherwise, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful night and great weekend coming up.